Welcome back to another episode of the Barcast. Here I have today with me Laxman.
Hey Hugo, how you doing?
I'm doing good. And today we're going to be talking about Zelda Breath of the Wild, even though it's been quite a while since it's been out.
Yeah, a few months, but better late than never, right?
I think people could still get back into it.
Yeah.
And especially with the DLC coming out, which we could talk about maybe.
Yeah.
People definitely will be coming back to this game.
Fair enough. So do you want to kick off with general impressions of the game? What did you think of it? Give it an overall score and then we'll justify that as we go on in the conversation.
Yep, so I thought overall I liked the game. I would rate it as an 8 out of 10. Even though there are a few things that I could nitpick about, the overall experience immersed me in the world and I really enjoyed my time in it. So I'd give it an 8.
Yeah, I would give it a 7.5 and we'll go into the reasons why, but I agree the world was fantastic. There's just a lot of, I think, technical issues as well as mechanical issues with the game, and it's definitely a flawed experience, but as a whole, it's kind of like you're looking at a landscape photo. Take it as one large thing, it looks amazing, but if you start zooming in on the details of the game, it kind of crumbles and falls apart. But we'll talk about that as we go on. So do you want to start with the story?
Yeah, so where is the story?
Yeah, more importantly, the lack thereof.
The lack of narrative. So you get characters like the leaders of the tribes. Are they tribes or the settlements?
I don't know, types of species.
Yeah,
really.
you get the types of species and you get the leaders. But they've got their own story.
But it's very surface level, right?
Yeah, Link doesn't fit into that whatsoever, aside from being the hero that's meant to save the world.
Yeah, nah. I think the story in this game is irrelevant. Basically...
Don't pay attention to it.
Link fell asleep, Ganon took over the world, now civilization's on its last legs and he's got to go save it. Pretty much how it goes.
It's not like every Link game though.
Yeah, but usually it has a bit more nuance, like Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess.
See, I haven't played any other Link game.
Zelda game?
Yeah, I haven't played any other Zelda game before. So this is the first one I've come into.
So here's the thing. Whether or not the lack of story bothers you. For instance, I didn't really like it that much, the fact that there was no story. I know for 99% of people, the fact that this game basically has no story doesn't bother them one bit in the slightest.
I mean, when you spend most people would have spent probably 90% of their time not even doing the story, would have just been exploring the world however they wanted.
Yeah.
Because it is gigantic.
But it's like that comes down to what you play games for, right? And what you want in a video game. So for me, personally, I definitely want... Story is a big thing.
So this would have just been not that great a game. I mean, not a game suited to your taste.
Right, but it's also like, if I'm going to go out and explore the world, I want to explore the world for a purpose. So in this game, you explore and get stronger so that you can face Ganon. But you can really face Ganon really easily, and he's beaten very quickly, as we've done. So therefore, once that's done, you don't really care.
There's nothing. There's no purpose to explore the world aside from your own motive, your own.
It's your own drive.
Exactly.
That the game needs, and I have no drive. so I need.
I mean, part of that drive comes into the Korok seeds and the finding all the shrines. That 100% completionist in you.
But you
don't have that.
Yeah, I don't have that.
Yeah. So, like as a completionist, you do that. That's the rest of your drive. You want to find all those Korok seeds. You want to find like those little Easter eggs that they hide. There's little islands on the side. Right. Or like there's all these little missions that you can set yourself or that the game sets for you.
Yeah.
Especially I think with the side quests that I don't think you did any side quests, did we?
We did a couple.
But there's like a good example is there's a side quest where there's a girl and all she wants is you to take photos of certain types of bones.
Right.
But in specifically like these old ancient bones. And so you end up going to the corners of the maps to find these skeletons, and when you find them, they're gigantic. It's like dragon size,
right?
And so it's just a nice you progress through the map, and you eventually find them, and you get you fulfill your side quest,
right? But I feel like, particularly with the one you just described, it's kind of like you're naturally exploring yourself, and then if you see it, you just tick it off along the way.
But you can already find it in the map, as in you can kind of. If you get to know the map more and more, you kind of understand where things could be. And in that way, it's like exploring. It's more like an adventure and discovery.
All right. Well, we'll talk about the map and the open world design a bit later down. But next, did you want to talk about
the visuals and the aesthetics?
Yeah, I think this game is gorgeous. I couldn't believe it that this was running on basically mobile hardware,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they should be highly commended.
I think
For
even with
pulling it
its those little nitpicky bits when you see pixelation, or even when it drops down to like 0 frames per second,
Right? Yeah.
you still forgive it because overall it's an unforgettable experience.
It's a game punching way above its weight, really,
Yeah.
is what it is. I think the game has excellent viewing distances, just anywhere really in the world.
Mm.
You know,
Aside from looking into a mountain.
yeah, or looking at like a wall. At any point in the game, wherever you are, you can turn around. There's a beautiful vista.
Mm.
Now, obviously, because of the Switch hardware and the power, as soon as you start examining details closely, the game really falls apart. Like if you look at a wall, you realize this texture is not very good.
Mm.
If you look at the grass, you realize the grass literally has no texture. It's just like a green blade.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes, and 95% of the time, this is not a problem because you're looking at the world as a whole.
And especially because you're running through the world. You're
Right.
not really paying attention at one point in any time.
But this falls apart because there are a couple of mazes throughout the game. Do you remember?
Which mazes?
Like for the shrines, right? There are a couple of mazes.
Oh, yeah, but that's because you have to take the time in the shrines.
No, but for instance, one time there was one of the shrines was in the middle of this maze.
Okay.
And you're spending this time in this maze. And when you spend a long time in something, you all of a sudden start to notice the details.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then you realize the textures are shit. You know, it was literally like someone had put wallpaper of a pillar against the wall, and it was like a flat where it should be 3D, and the world kind of falls apart.
Mm.
So I think the game is really good in those open, expansive areas.
Mm.
As soon as it confines you to an area, the immersion and the illusion
It breaks.
breaks for sure. I suppose we already touched on this, but the technical aspect, the game does drop frames quite consistently when the action gets too heavy on screen. And
But that barely happens until you get up to Ganon. So it's not really that big an issue.
really, I found in the forests, when we were in the forest, it dropped like crazy.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Do you know near the Master Sword, I think? Is that the big forest?
Oh,
near the Master
yeah.
Sword? As soon as like a little fire or enemies and explosions start happening, then the frame rate tanks like crazy in those areas. Now, what do you want to progress on to next? Gameplay, I'm guessing?
So it's controls.
Oh, the controls, yeah. This is a problem I had the entire time with the controls, is they're just not intuitive at all. And I understand this game has a lot of systems going on with it. For instance, the items, the magnesis, the ice thing, etc. So therefore, the controls are naturally going to be complicated. But the way it assigns some of the basic functions naturally conflicts with what your intuitive thoughts are if you've played games for a long time.
The way I approached it was, this was a new system, and it's Nintendo. Although I don't play my 3DS nearly enough,
Yeah.
I came into it ready to learn something new with the controls.
Right.
I wasn't really already set in like a PS4 or Xbox kind of way.
Right.
And especially because every time I play a PS4, I have to relearn controls anyway.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So to me, it didn't really have that big a difference. But it didn't feel like when I learnt the controls, it got any more streamlined. Maybe it got a few seconds faster when I did things, and I got used to it.
You didn't feel like,
But it didn't feel like I was any better than you who hadn't played for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose that's because everything takes quite a few button presses to get to, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not a lot of shortcuts or things like that. The one thing that kept messing me up was, so sprint is the bottom button, which I think is B on a Nintendo controller. I don't know, I'm just going to refer to it in PlayStation. It's X.
Yeah.
And then triangle was jump. And that messed with me so much. I would mess up things left, right, and center. Another issue. Yeah, and so it would be okay if I had time to think of what I was doing beforehand. But as soon as it had to become, instinctual, like against a line or something.
When it was pretty much reflex.
Yeah, I would.
You went to your PS4 reflex.
Yeah, and I know people are going to say, well, you just got to get good at it, or that's your fault for having it. But it doesn't make any sense for Nintendo to have gone against the regular conventions when they could have worked the regular conventions in and still had the control scheme work fine. I suppose that's just my opinion. And anything else you want to say about controls? Oh,
the 2-player controls.
Yeah, 2-player.
Yeah, so if you ever play Zelda Breath of the Wild, we recommend you play it 2-player.
One Joy-Con each, right?
One Joy-Con, one person with the left-hand one person with the right-hand one, and you have to teamwork your way through the game.
Makes the game much more entertaining. Makes it much more difficult.
It makes Ganon a lot more difficult of a boss, especially when you're in the end game.
And his castle, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's really needed because the game will now go into gameplay really, and that the game is quite easy in
Hmm.
terms of combat. So you'll struggle in the early sections of the game.
So the way when we started the game, we already started with
Yeah, 'cause Ken had played quite a
we start with another friend's saved
Save
file. So he argues that we simply don't know the very start of the game when you start and playing with a stick, and your weapons
are useless.
are useless. We started when you had somewhat decent weapons.
Yeah.
But from our experience from that point on, there wasn't really that big a challenge. It felt like there was no strategy to how you fought. It was simply
Right.
reflex.
I suppose that's my biggest problem. Is not that it wasn't difficult. It was that the game
It gives you
has
options.
a system where it forces your weapons to break. And the point of this is to make sure that you're constantly cycling different types of weapons
For a different strategy.
for different strategies, but the types of weapons don't impact
Your
combat.
strategy. Your combat ultimately is determined by, can you
Dodge.
Can you dodge this? Can you dodge that? Have you learned the pattern yet so you can dodge it?
Right.
And so ultimately,
Weapon types are
the weapon
irrelevant,
types are irrelevant.
except for the bow.
Yeah, well, they're both a completely different weapon.
Yeah.
But all the melee attacking weapons are kind of meshed into one. The only difference is attacking speed and the attack stat. And all you really ever want is, how big can my attack stat go?
Yeah. So there's not a lot of nuance, even though it's like fake nuance, right?
Yeah.
The game hints that there's a lot of depth, but then its enemies are not designed for that depth.
Mm.
And I think playing it co-op made the enemies much more difficult and much more enjoyable. But I know as soon as I played that single player, I was just wiping the floor with enemies. It became super, super easy, even after like just a little bit of time with the game. But back to the degradable weapons thing, I think the system isn't a good one in that it constantly breaks the flow of combat. Now, I know a lot of people like the degradable weapon systems, and I'm not saying it needs to go, but it needs to be reworked.
Even just having a repair feature.
Yeah, not even just that. I don't even mind that the weapons are gone for good. Like, I couldn't care if the Master Sword, you used it 10 times and it was gone, right? My biggest issue with it is that it breaks the flow of gameplay because your weapon will break and then you have to pause the game and select a new weapon.
Yeah, but an argument for that would be, if there was strategy to the game, you could think, the game's learned that I keep on using a spear and that my melee goes along this way. But if I change now to a battle axe, then my entire strategy changes and then the opponent won't be able to react to that. But then that's assuming there is strategy in the game, which there isn't.
But also the main issue is that it's not like if you have X amount of weapon slots, you have different weapons in each slot. Most of it's like 6 of the same weapon and then a couple of different ones. And so what you're doing is you're just changing from a version of the weapon to a copy of that weapon.
You're only changing because your weapon broke.
Right?
That was it.
And what all that does is just take you out of combat for a split second. And because the weapons degrade very quickly.
When you fight quite often, you fight small mobs, big mobs, even bosses, and you fight quite often, that it adds up, it builds up, and...
Yeah, you're pausing so many times, and it feels like you're just having a break put on your experience. It could be fluid, but then it's just like, pause, keep going, pause. It's like watching a basketball match when they're taking so many timeouts. You're just like, fuck, are you serious?
It could have just been solved by having instead of having to go to that menu, you could have like a shortcut for that menu, so you could just scroll through that.
No, I think what would have been a better idea is if you have like 6 of the same weapon.
Oh, when
one breaks, it automatically just equips the next version of it. And instead of like having an individual one, you have like charges. So if one royal sword has 20 swings in it, if you have 3, you've got 60 swings. And then at 20, there'll be like the sword will break, but you automatically just quickly re-equip it.
It makes you think, because they didn't put how many times it takes for you to break. They only give that indication of your sword's durability is low.
Right.
I think it's to make you more careful when you still fight with it. And so that when it does break, you have that little bit of chaos. It's like, oh God, what the hell? Like, my weapon just broke, I gotta quickly change.
Particularly if it's like your best weapon.
Yeah.
and
especially if you're in a boss. Yeah.
No, the biggest problem I have with...
In that way, it's kind of like forced tension.
Right.
Yeah, which isn't that great.
It's okay. I mean, it's tension still.
But do you want it every, however many minutes? If you're bossing every now and then.
It happens quite regularly, which is the issue. I think the biggest problem I have with it though is that it kind of devalues getting good weapons because they just break, and what you'll end up doing is you get a great weapon and you're like, I'm going to save this for something really good.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the way the gameplay is done, the only boss that's really, really tough and worth that weapon is Ganon.
Not even Ganon. Lionel's.
Lionel's. Because all the other mini bosses you find around, they all have this like one weakness that you just exploit.
You shoot their eye. You shoot this gemstone.
Spot. Yeah.
There's nothing to those bosses aside.
That means you need to use something special. Right?
Yeah.
It's all just exploit a weakness, and once you figure out that weakness, which they're very, very easy, it's not like they try and hide it at all. It's game over. Like I remember the first stone giant that has like the little lump that you're meant to attack. As soon as I saw that first one, I was like, I know what this fight needs.
Yeah.
How you're meant to beat it. Let's move on.
Actually, no. I still want to touch on. I want to touch on adaptive gameplay.
The emergent one, or adaptive.
Adaptive.
Okay.
Adaptive AI, especially because you didn't play. So I played a lot of endgame content.
Right, I didn't. Yeah.
I killed so many Lionels that was ridiculous. I could kill Lionels within minutes, not even minutes. If I really wanted to try and I used all my arrows, it could be within seconds.
Right.
And my point is, aside from the fact that you can abuse some things, for example, in the Colosseum, there's a blue Lionel down at the bottom, and you can jump down, and every time you open your parachute and open your bow, it slows down time, and you can abuse that and just shoot down a bajillion arrows, and the Lionel dies in an instant. Apart from that, when you actually fight the Lionel, every Lionel has different attack patterns, but they have that same attack pattern. And some of the attack patterns make sense, so that you have to switch between bow and switch between melee. You have to switch between how you're dodging things. But ultimately, it's all still cookie cutter. So the Lionels don't really feel different, even though they're in different areas. They don't feel different at all. Right. And it would have been nice if you keep using their bow, then they would only charge at you. So they would always close the distance, or they would actually bring their own bow out and murder you with that.
Yeah.
Instead, they just sometimes...
They follow a routine, right?
Yeah, sometimes I was using a bow, and then the Lionel would just stop because I hit him a few times with my bow, and he'll just shout and make an explosion around him, which is one of that special moves. And so I just got a few extra bow hits. That was very rare, the times when the AI just felt quite terrible. But the fact that all the Lionels had almost like a set pattern.
Yeah, once it's predictable, you can exploit it, right?
Yeah, you can. The first few times you kill a Lionel, and the first few times I killed a Lionel, it took maybe 10, 20 minutes because you're struggling with the dodging, you're struggling with how to react.
You're trying to figure it out.
But as soon as you get to your second or third, you've improved immensely, and by the time you get to your fifth, sixth, it's easy. It's almost as easy as killing any other regular mob.
Yeah, and I suppose that's my main issue with the game, is that the game, doing things the first few times is very good. It's fun. It's interesting. But 90% of this game is in-game content.
And the way they keep you for the endgame content is more like grinding. You have 900 Korok seeds to find. You have 100 and something, 140 or something like that, shrines. And then you have to get all your equipment. Well, you don't have to get them. But you have to keep up. All your in-game equipment should be at the top rank, at rank 4.
Yeah.
And to do that, you have to grind. It's just grind.
Right. Well, let's talk about something that I think is the best part of this game. And I thought the dungeons were fantastic. There's only 4 of them, which I know is, for long-time Zelda fans, is really disappointing. Another thing I know is a lot of Zelda fans, like Ken, was disappointed with the length. Now, I'm of the personal opinion that if it's good and short, then it's still good. And I think I'm a person that always prefers to have the fat cut out from games. I like lean. And so I really, really enjoyed it. I thought they were all very interesting, all very creative. And I enjoyed every single moment in each one of them. I didn't do the camel one, but you guys did, and you guys said that was a nightmare.
Oh, the camel one was by far the hardest dungeon we've ever done.
Right.
I think it was rotating... you rotated segments of the camel, and you really had to... It was a puzzle. If I had to rate the difficulties on the puzzle, all of them, except for the camel, would have been around about 4, because you could look at the map, you could find where each beacon, where those slots were, and it would be relatively easy, very not straightforward, but you use the puzzle, and that was very straightforward, using how to use the puzzle and how to get to those points. With the camel, it felt difficult. It actually felt quite difficult because you had to rotate each segment individually, and you had to kind of match how all three fit together to get where you wanted to go, and how to get to and to just get to the other slots.
Yeah.
So I think for the camel, it took us more than 2-3 hours. When for all the other puzzles, it maybe took us an hour tops.
But I thought, those dungeons were fantastic. The shrines, I think are okay. Some are pretty decent.
But they're treated more as fast travel points than they are dungeons.
Right, and even completing the puzzles is just a small side distraction.
Yes.
Even the toughest puzzles and the shrines, it took us maybe 2 minutes to figure it out, and then the rest was just doing it.
I think something I noticed was every time you went to the edges of the world, so end game, pretty much, all of the trials were trials by combat. Because I think you're sick of playing puzzles at that point. So they just give you, all right, we get it. We're just going to let you fight it. And you can beat the shit out of it and move on your journey. They're literally telling you, like, use this as a fast travel point. That's it.
Yeah, so I think there were nice distractions to kind of break up between, the open world gameplay. But they weren't particularly good. And I was originally against it, but I kind of like it and can convince me of this. Was the way in which you can kind of cheat it through the emergent gameplay, which we now get into. So, for instance, one of the puzzles with the electricity, instead of like connecting electricity, you just get an electricity sword and whack it. At first, I felt like you just cheated through the game and you don't get much satisfaction. But realistically, I had already figured out how to do the puzzle. This just made it quicker to get through it. So it wasn't like I had not figured it out because the puzzles were never that difficult. It was just saving me time. Another
thing you didn't actually experience was me and Ken searched up and found people who sped run dungeons, and we tried to learn their techniques. And one of the biggest techniques that always came out was this double jump. When you do your first jump and then you shield surf, you get a little hop when you shield surf, and that's like a small double jump.
Right.
And people use that. And then they also use this ragdoll feature with the bombing themselves. So that people would bomb themselves over things. Which is, you got to watch it, but it's really cool.
But I think that's one of the best parts is that in the open world, the emergent gameplay is fantastic. Just, you see something and you're like, instantly what comes to mind is like 5 different ways to do it. Each of them quite interesting. The problem is that, for instance, the first time in a thunderstorm, we like floated a piece of metal over to an enemy and got the lightning to hit it. That was great. But then after
you can only do it once.
Yeah, and then afterwards I'm just like, I'll just go up and smack you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the game loses its long-term...
longevity.
Yeah, its longevity because, you can do a lot of these emergent gameplay things, but very rarely is it the effective way to do something. It often requires you to go a roundabout way.
And sometimes it can ruin the experience. Like the time that we went and
the lava dungeon.
The lava dungeon. So along the way to the lava dungeon, you have to get rid of these sentries.
Yeah,
which are in the sky. And it's almost like, it is almost like a stealth mission, but we managed to get around it by simply floating a piece of metal above our heads and just walking all the way to the end.
Right.
Which is a nice thought, and it's nice to do, but all that challenge is taken away from it, which might have been interesting.
I think that's also us, but I feel like when you're a level designer and you ask the player to self-regulate, it's never going to work because we always want to do the easiest thing. Sometimes forcing an individual to go the hard way is better because I know as a player I'll always take the thing that means I spend less time.
The least effort.
Yeah, I always go the path of least resistance. So sometimes I need a level designer to be like, no, you're doing it our way and it's going to be tough. But when you finish it, you feel a sense of accomplishment. Now, this is one thing I want to talk about in regards to the emergent gameplay is what do you think of the open world design? They've radically changed the way
making everything climbable, scalable.
But always Zelda was a very linear experience. Progression, you go one thing you get one gadget, then you go through a section, you get another gadget, go through a section. In this one, you get everything at the start, and then you're off, free willy, go fly. But the point is, I don't think this is... It's good that the game gives you freedom.
I think this is a good direction to go in for future Zelda games.
But one thing I'd like to see changed is don't show all the abilities at the start.
Still
Because-
Zelda-like, obtain them one by one. Maybe make
Maybe if you go to
minor
certain-
dungeons or
yeah.
minor puzzles.
If you go to the dungeon, you might get a new ability.
And in that dungeon, the ability is what makes sense to use in that dungeon. Something like that.
Yeah, because what happens is you tend to kind of like the game doesn't really evolve from that point.
No, it doesn't.
And it's still a great game, but you kind of need to get led by the string. You know, you need to kind of have like a carrot in front of you that something is coming up in the future.
Yeah.
I know you get powers from the dungeons, but those powers just they're more quality of life powers, right?
Yeah.
Like
They don't really have
destroy them.
a big impact in the game. It's just
They
make
don't-
things more convenient.
They don't affect the emergent gameplay aspect of it,
Yeah.
as opposed to like magnesis and ice abilities and whatever the rest were. What did you think about the distance? Because this world is very large, and I feel like it's too big. There's a lot
I think this is more to do with the player, because your attention span isn't that long,
Right.
and you don't quite enjoy traveling and exploring, not nearly as much as.
But it's like if I'm exploring and something's beautiful, cool. But if it's beautiful all the time, then those moments where the game wants me to show me something, I don't go, wow. Actually, that was poorly explained. I take that back.
Yeah,
That made no sense. No, my issue with
but
it-
is it still beautiful?
Yeah. Forget what I just said. But the main issue I had with it was just getting from point A to point B was so long.
I mean, but I still feel like this is your character. You explained driving to me, and it's literally I drive as quickly as possible to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And like when I drive, I enjoy driving. And that's because it doesn't matter how I drive to my girlfriend's, and that takes 45 minutes, yeah. And I have to drive home as well.
Yeah.
That's an hour and a half of driving. It's 60 Ks, yeah. I drive that half of my week. What, that's 240 Ks, 180 Ks. I drive a ridiculous amount. And all I do is listen to music the entire way. And it's not like I hate the driving. Like sometimes I do, but it's like I really enjoy it because I get that time to appreciate what's in front of me, my thoughts on what's in front of me, or my thoughts on the music. It's like, it's not like
It's your me time.
It's not, yeah, it's not like self-reflection though. It's like an appreciation of what's going on that I'm focusing on. And you can get that with Zelda.
See, here's the thing. I can get that for short periods of time.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
For instance, I couldn't play this game for like a 5-hour session.
I played this for like a whole day.
I would play this game if I was like stoned out of my mind, be like, yeah. But no.
See, I played this for a whole day, and sure, most of that might have been a blur just from traveling, but there are so many highlights, especially, I think, mainly from the dragons, because, by God, when you get close up on the dragons and when you do things to the dragons,
It's awesome.
it's amazing.
But yeah, I think I just realized is like, because I play a lot of video games, and so I stopped looking at it. I start looking at when I experience a video game as value for time. And so I play Zelda, and you just hit your head on it, hit the nail on the head. No, hit your head on it.
It's my head on the game. Yeah.
But you're like, oh, so you'll play it for a day, and most of it's a blur, but you don't mind.
I don't mind because overall I felt a sense of achievement. I felt fulfillment in the game.
But if I'm having like my gaming time, I've got already like a backlog of games. You know, I did my cataloging of games that I've got.
Yeah.
And I've got over like 550. So
it's like you have deadlines. It's like I have to feel this within 2 hours. Otherwise, it's not that great a game.
Because it's like I can play this game for 10 hours and have like one memorable moment. Or I can play Uncharted 4, complete the entire game, and have like 30 memorable moments.
That's fair enough.
And so when I look at that, I go, you know, I know you're cool and stuff, but you're just not worth my time.
But sometimes it is nice to just slow down.
I know, but that's why I'm probably the only person that's still playing No Man's Sky. But that's No Man's Sky. It's got a killer soundtrack. Whenever I'm late at night, tired, so I'll just play this for an hour. I'll sit in front, go to a new planet, just sit there and enjoy myself, and then go to bed. But yeah, I think the open world nature of the game is a good way to go.
I think it's almost like this first Zelda was an experiment. Because it is a reimagining and it goes into what it could be. And I think the response is very good.
They did a really good job of modernizing the game. What did you think of voice acting? Because this is the first Zelda to ever have voice acting.
Link's was amazing.
Link's was amazing. I sound like a little girl.
Did he?
Am I the only one thinking that?
Oh, I mean, you could chalk it down to like Japanese.
Maybe he's a little boy.
Maybe little boy is. I don't know. We don't know how. He's 1,000. He's at least 1,000 years old.
Yeah, that thing always bothered me though. Whenever I see like a young kid going to save the world, I get it. This is kind of a kid's game, but
the thing is, the market for this game.
The market for this game.
The demographic is like 20.
30-year-old Nintendo fanboys
Yeah.
that are reliving the past. But yeah, I always think it bizarre when I see. Basically, he looks like a kid. I can't imagine he's more than 12. And he's like going on to save the world.
Especially when you see him compared to everyone else in the world.
Yeah.
Like you go to the Gerudo Plains, and then he's actually like half their size. You can go to like
other Hylians as well. He's still like small.
yeah, he's still tiny.
Right. But what did you think of the voice acting in general? I thought the English voice acting sucked.
Oh yeah, English voice acting. Not maybe it's because we went to the Japanese first. That might have influenced our experience, but the Japanese felt a lot more natural.
Right. Also, I think.
I mean, as natural as like you can have someone who's a fish talking to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they put much money or much effort really into the voice acting, either Japanese or English. It was pretty okay. Japanese was feasible. English wasn't good, but there wasn't much of it anyway. Only in key scenes, and key scenes again, the story wasn't very good, so you didn't really care about it that much.
We ended up skipping it.
Yeah, we ended up skipping it. It was so boring. But I did think it was odd that they didn't decide to voice Link.
But isn't that just tradition?
But silent protagonist thing has sort of ended. If you think even Fallout went from silent protagonist.
But if their demographic is Nintendo fans and who've already played Zelda, then they would find it completely natural, and they might even find it like outrageous to have Link with a voice.
Nah, I mean they've broken every convention this game. I highly doubt that like Link having a voice is going to send them like a Nintendo. Right. Literally none of this game is. Well, not literally none of the game, but a lot of this game has been reimagined, redesigned. They've broken every old convention of Zelda to bring it into the modern era. If a Nintendo fanboy draws the line at Link being voiced, I don't know. I don't think most people would even mind.
Yeah.
But, so to wrap it up, this is quite a big game. I don't know, I feel like we've already said everything about it. The gaming experience is enhanced playing co-op, I feel.
Which is completely unintended.
Yeah, it's unintended, but it's just through sheer design of the console.
Through sheer will of the two people playing the game.
Yeah, sheer will. It feels like you get better at communicating with your partner, though.
Yeah, it is. You set aside differences to come for a common goal.
And also what ends up happening is it's comical at the start. At the start, You're both acting independently. But then towards the end, I noticed particularly because I played a lot of it with Ken.
Yeah.
We ended up being able to like know what we were both going to do before.
You knew what was going to be the action to take.
And so
by looking at the screen, not by looking at each other and being like, yeah, this.
Yeah. And so what ended up happening is it started looking more and more like one person was playing the game.
Yeah.
If you were watching our gameplay.
Yeah.
Whereas at the start, it'd be like, run, stop, turn camera, run, stop. No, you can't move whilst I'm trying to shoot an arrow. Otherwise, I have no clue what's going on. Whereas towards the end, we're doing all those things together, and it was looking
switching bow ammo. Because you have to go to the bow, then the person has to switch the arrow, and you have to communicate that in the middle of the battle.
Yeah, same with like weapons and things like that.
Yeah.
And then also...
now we're getting not the map. The inventory.
Everything requires like two people.
And it's like if someone's not paying attention in the inventory, it's like the person who moves side to side and selects it, and then the person just like waiting there. It's like, dude, you have to go down. It's like go down.
No, and then another one was the biggest problem was dodging and shield. And
you just sucked at that though.
No, but dodging required two people to be in sync. That was the problem.
See, I actually found out that dodging is a lot easier than you think it is because you can already be in the direction before you press the dodging button. I think it's X, right?
Yeah.
So dodging would have been a lot easier if we'd known this before because then we'll say Ken was the one with the directionals. He would have been moving backwards and then you could press X anytime you wanted.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So because we set the condition that you had to press both at the same time, which would have been so much harder for you guys. Yeah. But yeah, you could be in the direction you wanted, then dodge.
Yeah.
So that was just our challenge that we set ourselves.
But yeah. One thing I just want to bring up. Turn off a lot of the HUD.
A HUD?
The game has got quite a busy HUD. naturally.
Mm.
And you can go into the options menus and turn it off and just keep your essential things on. Maybe turn it to a dynamic one so whenever you get hit, your health bar pops up. Because it makes the experience of the game much better.
You can appreciate the scenery.
Yeah, because it's just less clutter on screen, and when you need it, it will pop up. I think a lot of games going forward should have dynamic HUDs so that they turn off when nothing's going on, and then if a combat starts, your health bar will pop up. I forgot I was going to say one more thing, but I think we'll just wrap it up here.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us, Hugo.
No worries. I mean, joining us. It's just us two.
Just us two.
Yeah.
Joining me.
Yeah, no worries.
And we'll chat later. E3 one.
Yeah. Hopefully that comes out within this week.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for joining us, everyone.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.